No one can see me anymore. No one can hear me. No one can touch me. I don't exist. I wasn't even born. Have you checked the children?
Hello?
Why haven't you checked the children?
When a Stranger Calls stars Carol Kane, Charles Durning, the late Tony Beckley, and is directed by Fred Walton. What's up, guys? Welcome to, I guess, an unscheduled review. I guess sort of a patron request, though, because, I don't know, I've been in a When a Stranger Calls. That's hard to say. It sounds like Winter Stranger. When a Stranger Calls mood. My friend Jason from Sinister Cinema Reviews, who reviews everything, he does like 8 videos a day, something like that. But I can give him shit because he's given me shit before. But he did the When a Stranger Calls series, and it reminded me, I bought this Blu-ray probably like before I even started my channel, like maybe 10 years ago. And I got it at Walmart for $5, and it had When a Stranger Calls and Happy Birthday to Me. And I reviewed Happy Birthday to Me. But I did watch When a Stranger Calls when I first bought this. I saw the remake first, and I was curious to check out this movie. And like most people, let me put this down, the first 20 minutes I thought was the full movie. You know, I thought we were gonna be in that house with her for the duration of the movie, because that's really what the remake is. The remake takes that first portion and stretches it out for 90 minutes. So, as you can imagine, when I first watched this, the first 20 minutes happens, and then it goes into this kind of exploration of the actual killer. And I was thrown off guard. And the opening 20 minutes is so good and so iconic that after it's over, it's easy to kind of discard what comes after. And I think that's the problem that most people have with this movie.
Leave me alone!
Jill, this is Sergeant Sacker. Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. A squad car's on the way over there right now. Just get out of that house.
After I noticed that Jason reviewed this, I said, you know, I'm gonna watch this again. And I threw it in, and I have a much, much stronger appreciation for this movie now. But going back to what I was saying about the patron, I forgot to mention that. I'm all over the place. But Josh Ellis, he asked me, I think it was on Instagram, he was like, hey, you're doing all this Scream content, but do you think you can maybe squeeze in When a Stranger Calls since you just watched it? And yes, that's a great idea. As a matter of fact, I just gave it another watch, just right before recording this. Just to get more fresh eyes on it, really kind of dive deep, especially into that part after the first 20 minutes. So yeah, looking forward to diving into this one. But also keep in mind, if you've never seen this movie, this will contain spoilers, okay? This is a movie from 1979. Of course, I'm gonna talk about spoilers in this because it's a great exploration of the killer. And it's probably one of the most unique slashers I think ever, like really of its kind, because it's sort of like a blend of different slasher movies. The first 20 minutes feels like your home invasion, and then the rest of the movie, I guess the middle part is where we explore the killer. So we're kind of Silent Night, Deadly Nighting it in this portion, because remember in that movie we explore Billy. You know, it's from the killer's point of view. And then the last part of the movie, we catch up with Carol Kane's character, Jill, from the first 20 minutes. And it's riveting. So this movie has a unique pace because it's very tension-filled for that first 20 minutes. Then you get this exploration. And then the last is where it's really ratcheted up. I think intentionally, it gets even more chaotic. That's where really chaos comes into the mix, the last 20 minutes. But if you don't know the story of When a Stranger Calls, it's actually a pretty well-covered plot line, because it's the stranger is in the house. And I think this movie gets the most popularity out of that plot line, and it does it so well. If you think back, Black Christmas, 1974, which predates this, had a similar premise. You know, you got the killer in the house, but that isn't really the point of the movie. When that twist comes about at the end of that movie, it's kind of like one of 10 different crazy things that are going on in that. Whereas in this one, at least in that first 20 minutes, that's kind of what the point of the opening is, you know, just to build this crazy tension without really much going on. All you have is a babysitter and a telephone. And the phone rings like at the perfect amount of time, like it's spaced out. Just the right amount of time so that you get the maximum amount of tension out of the scene.
Hello?
Why haven't you checked the children?
Hell, even Kevin Williamson paid homage to this scene in Scream, the opening of Scream with Drew Barrymore's character and the killer calling her on the phone. You know, that is an homage to When a Stranger Calls. But really, if you break down that first 20 minutes, this might be the most effective, tension-filled opening of any horror movie I've ever seen. Just because of how little there is in this scene. It's the most economic use of scares I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is it feels like they could have shot this scene with just the location, some great acting by Carol Kane and Tony Beckley, and just, you know, effectively spacing out the tension and spacing out the scares. And my God, the score by Dana Kaproff, and really it's laced throughout this movie, but I think it's the most effective during that first 20 minutes. And I think if you didn't have that score, it would only be half as good. And it's still really good, but I like music that isn't overwhelming. You know, it's impactful when it needs to be impactful. And sometimes you gotta know when to put the silence in a scene, and that can even make it more chilling. And this first 20 minutes, it's like a lesson where to properly place your music. I think if you're like a film student and you're wanting to get into horror and you really have a budget, watch the first 20 minutes of this movie because it really tells you how to do it. And in terms of scares, just overall, this movie, not a single jump scare can be found, you know? It relies on, you know, building tension. The stuff that John Carpenter was a master at with the original Halloween, just stretching a scene out as much as possible, but not losing your attention. And the first 20 minutes, I think for everybody, they can say you're glued to the screen. You can't look away. You want to know what's happening. One of my favorite scenes in the opening is, I think it's like the third or fourth time, and we get a view from outside looking through the window, and Carol Kane's character, after the phone rings, "Have you checked the children?" That iconic line. She turns around, looks at the camera. It's like the camera is scaring the audience, even though this isn't the killer's point of view because the killer's in the house. But at this point, we think it's the killer. You know, it's misdirection. We think the killer is outside because we don't know that the killer's in the house yet. That's revealed like at the end of the scene. So there's a lot of things going on that can really catch you off guard and scare the shit out of you in this first 20 minutes. This movie started off as just a short story by Fred Walton. And after the success of Halloween, he decided, you know what, let's go ahead and make this a feature film. But I think he did it the right way. Instead of let's stretch out that opening scene for 90 minutes. To me, that would be kind of cheap, and they did that in the remake again. Let's explore the killer, and let's make it 7 years later, because that gives the family enough time to grieve. But really the big thing is Carol Kane's character, Jill. She has children of her own, and so this is a great way to bring it around full circle in that super effective last act where she's at the restaurant. You know, this stuff is way in her rear view, and then she's at the restaurant and all of a sudden the phone from the restaurant rings, and Kurt, the killer, he requests a conversation with her. And so when she talks to him,
Have you checked the children?
he only says one thing: have you checked the children? And the scream after that, it just chilling. You know, there's a few horror movies like that where you hear a scream and it just completely floors you and you're not prepared for it, and it's shocking. Because I think when a scream is effective, the victim feels like they have zero control whatsoever. In this case, Jill is at a restaurant. She is quite a ways away from her family. And her children, they might already be dead, or she might not have enough time to get to them to save them. one of the most effective twists in this movie is actually in the first act, when at the end of all that, the first twist, you find out that he is in the house, but then the second twist is you find out that he killed the children. The children were already dead by the time she got there, because she never checked the children, which is one of the things that you could poke at with this movie. Like, this guy's telling her to check the children, and not once does she go and check them. But let's talk about the middle portion of the movie. I'm kind of doing this in like a Tarantino order for the review. I've talked about the bookends. Now let's talk about the middle. Tony Beckley, the actor that played Kurt, he actually was terminally ill during this movie. He died. He never even got to see the movie. And Fred Walton was friends with Tony. He didn't think that Tony really fit the part of the killer, but he cast him anyway. And I don't know if that was because maybe he just felt bad for him because he was sick, but or maybe he was just friends with him. But thank God he did, because Tony Beckley turns in a phenomenal performance in this movie, and it's very nuanced. You can tell this is a very seasoned, well-trained actor that doesn't go for the knee-jerk things that we would expect young actors to do, to give a more bombastic, really upfront performance. No, he looks for the quiet moments, the nuances. One of my favorite scenes, there's a couple great scenes in this section of the movie actually, but what I mentioned at the beginning of the movie in my intro, at the end of all this tracking down by Cliff, played by Charles Durning, who is pretty much like the Loomis of this movie. He's the detective that's hired to catch Kurt. But before we get to the final scene, he's, you know, in the shadows, and you see the camera like pulling back, and he basically says,
No one touches me. I'm not here. I don't exist. I was never born.
I don't exist. You can't see me. You can't hear me. You can't. This is the mind of a deranged killer, psychopath. There's a moment where he's standing in the mirror, you know, naked. He's reminiscing about what he did 7 years ago, and you see these traumatic scenes. You know, this is where like the aftermath of a kill is the most effective, when you place it like way later in the movie instead of like right after. But you know, you see all the blood on him. And it's chilling because you're thinking, oh my God, he killed these children. He killed both of them. And you see all the, you know, their blood on him. You sort of almost feel bad for this killer. That's why I like Kurt as a character study so much, because he's not like your normal cliche slasher killers like Myers, you know, like Jason Voorhees, even like Freddy Krueger, even though Freddy Krueger is highly interesting. Hell, I think Myers is highly interesting, but I've talked about that ad nauseum. But this is just another case of a very interesting killer. And he's not the type of killer that can just take out anybody. You know, the scene in the bar where he's tracking his next victim, and this guy comes up and says, hey, leave her alone, and he beats the shit out of him. If anything, I'm just glad that Tony Beckley was able to leave behind such a great performance. And this is a movie that you can tell has inspired so many filmmakers throughout the years, just because of how nuanced and how original and unique it is as a plot. You know, there's no other slasher like When a Stranger Calls. And I'm glad I gave this movie a couple more tries, so I could really just kind of focus in on that middle scene. And this last time I watched it, it's like everything just kind of jumped out at me, because I was already prepared for the first 20 minutes, and it's still just as effective. You know, that is still the best part of the movie. But I would urge you guys to go back, give this another watch, and really just focus in on the character study of Kurt. So, you know, in the end, I think I'm going to give this movie a Trapped on an Island. And that shocks me, because I was never a big When a Stranger Calls fan, but it kind of creeped up on me, I guess like Kurt did. And I love this movie now. I think it's one of the most important slashers out there. And it's one of those movies that begs another viewing, just because of how effective the opening 20 minutes are. I mean, it's iconic. So anyway, guys, that's my review for When a Stranger Calls 1979. I haven't seen When a Stranger Calls Back. Maybe I'll review that one. And I've been planning on doing the remake, actually. And I don't hate the remake. For a time, I preferred the remake over this one. But after this watch, no way in hell. Now I get why this movie is so important. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. We do free for Fridays. And follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. And Drumdum out.